My name is Cassidy. I'm 32 years old and I have never once in my adult life asked for a handout, a shortcut, or a soft landing. That's not a flex. That's just what happens when someone spends the most formative years of your life telling you that you're headed for nothing. You either absorb it or you decide it's wrong. I decided it was wrong. My dad remarried when I was 13. Her name was Renee. She was 42, sharp-featured, well-dressed, and the kind of person who made you feel slightly off balance in your own home without ever raising her voice. She used politeness the way some people use a blade, precisely and always at the right angle. My mom had passed 4 years before that. Cancer. The kind that moves fast and doesn't negotiate. I was 9 when we lost her, and by the time Renee came into our house, I had already learned to be very quiet about the things that hurt. I thought that quietness might be something she'd respect. It wasn't. She had a daughter, Skylar, who was 2 years older than me. And in Renee's view, was the definitive answer to every question about what a young woman should be. Skylar was social, confident, and knew how to perform for adults in a way I never did. I was bookish and private and spent most of my time doing homework at the kitchen table or reading in my room. Renee interpreted this as a character flaw. The comments started small. A tilt of the head when I talked about my grades, a tight smile when I mentioned a goal, little edits to my confidence made so regularly they almost felt normal. Almost. But the moment I carry with me, the one that never fully dissolved, happened when I was 17. Christmas dinner. My dad's sister, Patrice, was visiting. A family friend named Gerald who'd known my dad for 20 years was at the table. I had just told everyone that I'd applied to 4 universities, including one in Nashville with a strong business program. I'd worked for it. I was proud. My dad started to smile and then Renee set down her fork. Renee, that's fine, Cassidy. Applying is easy, but let's be realistic. She's never shown the kind of follow-through that college actually demands. I mean, I love her, I do, but I've watched her for 4 years and between us, I genuinely worry she'll end up on the streets before she figures herself out. Some kids just don't have that internal drive. It's not a criticism, it's just honest. She said it gently, conversationally, like she was sharing a concern with close friends at a dinner party, which to her, she was. My Aunt Patrice looked at her water glass. Gerald shifted in his chair. My dad said, "Renee," once, softly, and that was the end of it. I didn't flinch. I didn't leave the table. I cut my turkey and I finished my dinner and I excused myself politely when it was over. And in my room that night, I sat on the edge of my bed and I made myself a promise that I didn't write down or say out loud because some promises are too important for words. I got into Nashville on a partial academic scholarship. I supplemented the rest with grants and a part-time job at a campus bookstore. I did not ask Renee for anything. College did what it was supposed to do. It expanded everything. I studied business administration and fell into a concentration in finance that surprised even me. I was not the student who coasted. I was the one in the front row asking follow-up questions. I had something to prove and I was smart enough to eventually let that motivation shift from anger into genuine ambition. That transition, from proving people wrong to building something real, is the one I'm most proud of. After graduation, I took a financial analyst position at a firm in Atlanta. Entry level, modest salary, long hours. I didn't mind any of it. I liked the clarity of numbers. I liked that results were measurable. Nobody could editorialize a spreadsheet. I kept in touch with my dad. Sunday calls, holidays when I could manage it. Renee and I existed in the same orbit when necessary and stayed out of each other's way when possible. My dad was a good man, who had made a choice I didn't agree with and lived with the consequences in his own private way. I loved him anyway. My cousin Tara, Aunt Patrice's youngest who'd been at that Christmas dinner, would check in from time to time. She had a good memory and a directness I appreciated. Tara, so, I heard through Mom that Renee told someone at church that you were getting by. That's the phrase she used, just getting by. I thought you should know because I think she's been saying stuff like that for years and nobody calls her on it. I thanked Tara. I did not call Renee. I went back to work. By 29, I had moved up to a senior analyst role and started consulting on the side for small business owners who needed financial planning help. I was good at translating complicated things into plain language people could act on. That skill turned out to be worth more than I expected. My consulting practice grew quietly. I kept it off social media. I had no interest in broadcasting my life to people who had already decided what it looked like. I bought a condo in Atlanta at 30. 2 bedrooms. Nice light in the morning. I stood in the empty living room the day I got the keys and thought about that Christmas dinner. About the way Renee had set down her fork. About how calm she had been when she said it. I thought, she never once called to check if she was wrong. And then I unpacked my boxes and got on with my life because that was always going to be the better use of the time. My dad's health had started to slip by. Then, nothing urgent, but enough that I flew home twice that year. Renee and those visits the way 2 people manage a waiting room. Cordial. Minimal. She looked older. So did I, probably. Neither of us said anything real. Skylar, I'd heard through Tara, had started a boutique event planning business in Phoenix. It had done well for a while, then hit a wall. I had no feelings about it either way out. Skylar and I had never been cruel to each other. We just never been real to each other, either. She existed in a different atmosphere in that house and we both knew it. I had not heard from Renee directly in years. Not a text, not an email, not a happy birthday. Nothing until last week. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at my kitchen counter going through client notes with my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the area code. Something in me stilled. I picked up on the 4th ring. Renee Cassidy. Hi, honey, it's Renee. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Honey. That word landed like a stone in still water. She hadn't called me that since I was 13 and she was still performing the role of someone who cared how I felt. Cassidy. Me. Renee. It's been a long time. Renee. It has. It has. I know. Listen, I'll get right to it because I know you're busy. Skylar is going through a rough patch. The business didn't quite work out the way she hoped and she's looking to pivot into something more stable. Finance, maybe, or consulting. I know that's your world now and I thought, well, you know people, the right people. And since you're family, I was hoping you might be willing to put her in touch with someone. Maybe write a note on her behalf. Just a foot in the door, really. I let the silence sit for a full 3 seconds. I watched the light come through my kitchen window, the same light I'd chosen this condo for. She hadn't asked how I was. She hadn't said she was proud of what I'd built or that she'd heard things had gone well or that she owed me any kind of acknowledgement. She had called with an errand. That's all this was to her. An errand she assumed I would run because she had always assumed I would eventually be useful and never particularly interesting. I thought about Aunt Patrice at that Christmas table. About Gerald shifting in his chair. About my dad saying Renee's name once, softly, and then letting it go. About every family gathering where someone repeated her words back to me secondhand. Not quite apologizing, just informing. I thought about the version of this moment I used to imagine when I was younger. The speech, the receipts, the moment where she finally understood the damage she'd done. I'd written that speech 100 times in my head over the anymore and I've learned that people like Renee don't actually hear speeches. They process them as attacks and rearrange the story so they're the victim. I wasn't going to give her that. What I was going to give her was the one thing she never expected from the girl. She wrote off at a Christmas dinner table in front of witnesses. I kept my voice completely even. Cassidy. Me. I remember Christmas dinner, Renee. When I was 17, I remember exactly what you said and I remember who was sitting at that table when you said it. I hope Skylar finds her footing. And I ended the call. No trembling. No adrenaline spike. Just the quiet of my kitchen and the light through my window and my coffee going slightly cold. She called back 11 minutes later. I watched the phone light up and I let it ring out. She called a second time 20 minutes after that. Then nothing. No voicemail either time. People who have never admitted fault don't know how to leave a message when the silence proves a point they've spent years refusing to acknowledge. I texted Tara that evening. Nothing about the call, just to check in. She sent back a voice note laughing about something her kid had done, and I stood in my kitchen smiling at it while I cooked dinner. Ordinary, peaceful, completely mine. I thought about Skylar briefly. I genuinely don't wish her harm, but Skylar had a mother who cleared every path for her and pointed at me as the cautionary tale. I'm not anyone's stepping stone, and I'm not obligated to become someone's ladder just because we shared a house for 5 years. The favor Renee called to ask required me to use the career I built, the relationships I cultivated, the credibility I earned over a decade of quiet, unglamorous work. All of it built in direct contradiction to what she declared about me in front of my family. She wanted the fruit of everything she said I was incapable of growing. That's not a favor. That's a conclusion to a story she wrote wrong. If I could go back to that Christmas dinner, not to change anything, just to sit next to 17-year-old me for a moment, I'd tell her this: don't waste a single night on that speech. Don't rehearse it. Don't refine it. The most devastating thing you will ever say to someone who dismissed you is something that proves they were wrong, without explaining how. Something that shows you remember without giving them the satisfaction of knowing how much it hurt. Something like, "I remember what you said." I hope she figures it out. Then, hang up the phone, go back to your life, and let your ordinary Tuesday morning be the most eloquent thing you've ever said.